I'm gonna stand over here, so I'm hopefully on the web screen. Hello to anyone who's watching us in the ether. My name is Nathan Selikoff, and I started this event called Processing Orlando a couple months ago. And I'm starting it basically to engage people around town who are interested in using programming as a creative tool. So you could be an artist, you could be a musician, an architect, somebody who just considers themselves creative and interested in technology, and you want to see kind of how art and technology mix. So a couple events we've had in the past, we talked about a tool that the Meetup is named after called Processing, which is a free and open source programming language that is really good for learning how to do things like graphics programming in a way where there's not a lot of kind of overhead to deal with. You can really just dive in and start creating cool things. So we watched a documentary about that, and we also, at our second meeting, I led kind of a beginner processing workshop. So if you haven't signed up for my mailing list on processingorlando.org, I would encourage you to do that so that you'll get notifications about future events. And we also have, Facebook, Google+, Twitter, etc. where you can follow us. And tonight, my friend Sergio is going to be talking about how to set up a basic VJ rig with a tool called Quartz Composer. So at this point, you've probably read the description of the events, and I'll let Sergio introduce himself and give you a little background on where he's coming from, and then we'll just dive right in.
Okay, hi, my name is Sergio Mora. I've kind of a part-time DJ, I guess. I started doing this, a while back. I've done a few nightclub events, I've done some art shows, and I've got a semi-regular event that I do at Stardust Coffee and Film here in Orlando. We've got an event coming up this Friday if you want to see this stuff live. But you'll see just about everything that I use. I'm actually going to hopefully walk you through the creation of. So those of you that are following along, you'll go home with the same rig that I have built up for the events that I do. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully you've all got Quartz Composer somewhat installed or ready to go. If not, we are streaming this and recording it, and I can certainly save the project that we create here, so you can take it with you as well.
Sergio, I have a question. Where do I find the link for the streaming?
If you go to any of the Processing Orlando stuff, it's posted on Facebook or Twitter or Google+.
Okay, so just I guess to start off with, let me see a show of hands. How many people here have ever VJ'd before? Nobody. Okay. How many people here have worked with Quartz Composer? Okay, one. Great. So okay, well that's all right. We're starting from the ground floor anyhow. So I guess we'll start off with a little bit of history about Quartz Composer in general. It started off its life as something called Pixel Shot Studio. It was developed by Pierre Oliver Latour, and it got the attention of Apple, and they bought it and incorporated it into OS X. And so now it's free for just about any Mac. As far as where it stands in relation to a few of the other VJ environments out there are a lot of different tools out there. Some very professional, very specialized environments for VJ. Create Digital Motion did a survey a couple of years ago asking people what environments they used, and they came back with Modulate, Resolume, Bitbox, Quartz Composer, and you can see a decent amount here using processing as well. Something interesting about these results here is that just about all of these other tools, with maybe a few exceptions to the more programming environment type ones, but certainly these three and several others allow the ability to incorporate Quartz Composer compositions. So Quartz Composer, it's a lot more than just a VJ tool. You can use it to create any kind of motion graphics. You can even use it to create static graphics if you wanted. But it's very versatile, and so like I said, there are plugins, so the things that you learn here, if you decide to move on to one of these other programs, you can use there. So it is a little bit different than what you might see in a few other more professional packages. This is an example of sort of a stock Quartz Composer patch, what you might see when you have it built out. As you can see, there's not a whole lot to grab onto here. It's mostly just these patches here with the different types of connections you can make in between them. Let's contrast that with one of the more specialized VJ suites. This is an example of Modulate. So you can see that they've built out, they've got a really nice sort of palette here that you can use to preview videos and get them preloaded. They've got a preview window that you can use to see what's coming out of your mix before it actually goes up on the screen. Similarly, Resolume has kind of similar things going on here. You've got your preview palette. You've got a dashboard here with a lot of controls available to you that you can see right away and work with. Again, you've got your preview here. And we're going to be building out the basic group that we start off with is going to look a bit more sort of like this, but as we move on, as we develop it, we're going to sort of incorporate some workarounds that will give us this kind of functionality, these kinds of dashboards and these previews. This part's pretty easy right away, and you can see that. And this is going to take a little doing, but it's not that difficult at all. Those are some of the maybe cons to using Quartz Composer. The pros are pretty big. If you have OS 10, you have Quartz Composer basically. You might have to go to download developer tools and install them. But it's free, as opposed to $350 and up for some of the other suites. Quartz Composer is a programming environment, so you can build just about anything you want in Quartz Composer. It's very flexible. There's a lot of community support for it. There are a lot of developers that are still making custom patches. And again, it's highly, highly customizable. So are there any questions before we dive in here? No? Okay. So hopefully at this point we're ready to go with Quartz. Depending on your setup, it might be in any number of different places. For me, let's see, it's here in Developer, Applications, Tools, I believe, yeah. Right, Quartz. So let's open up a Quartz Composer window. It'll give us several different options of what we can create here. You'll notice that you can create music visualizers pretty easily. Screensavers, there are several screensavers that are included with some versions of OS 10 that are developed directly in Quartz Composer. So let's go ahead and do this blank composition. And we'll choose that one. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit cramped. Normally, in a performance scenario, instead of these displays being mirrored, I'd have them extended, and this viewer window would be all by itself on a separate display. But for demo purposes here, I'm going to have them together. You see exactly what I'm doing here. So the first thing that we want to take a look at, let's go ahead and open up the Quartz VJ folder that hopefully everybody has. So we've got, what we can do right away is we can use this to sort of mimic the preview window that you see in some of the other environments. So you could take this window and use Coverflow. What I've found to be most useful is to use this view right here, just a single icon view. So I'm going to size that appropriately. So I give myself a nice big preview there. And normally what I do when I'm running shows is I will have it open like this, and I'll scroll through. Sometimes I'll actually use this view, depending on how many clips I have queued up and what I'm going to be doing. To give us our preview back, I'm going to go ahead and shrink that down here. So one of the things that you notice when you create a basic composition is that depending on the way you have your environment set, it'll either come in empty or it'll come in with a clear patch. Let's talk about just a few definitions here. Open up. So I'm going to use Command Enter to pull up my patch creator. To depending on your version of Quartz Composer or OS 10, this might look a little different. It might be called a library. In this case, if you do Command Enter, it'll pull up the patch creator. And what I'm looking for is a clear patch. So the clear patch, what that will do is that will clear out the frame buffer. Every time it draws a frame to the display, it needs to go back to this clear patch and wipe out anything that was on the screen before. If you want to experiment with some glitch effects a little bit, you can delete this clear patch and you'll see trails and all kinds of strange things filling up the screen. But for 99% of your compositions, you're going to want this clear patch to be in place. So this is what we call a patch. I'm talking about here. You'll see these little dots here. These are the ports that you can use. When we start to build out our composition, we'll be dragging lines between the output ports of some patches and the input ports of other patches. So this is an example of a very basic patch. There's really not a whole lot else to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and give us something to project onto, and that's going to be our billboard. So again, I'm going to go ahead and close this. And bring in our patch creator, I'm going to do a Command Enter. And I'll search for billboard. Drag that into the composition here. There are a couple of things that you can do once you've got this open. You can take a look at different parameters of the whole patch, or you can take a look at a specific patch. You can do this through this icon here, this patch inspector. What I like to do is use the keyboard shortcut for it again, which in this case is Command I, and that pulls up my inspector. So every patch has a few things that you can change about it. There are different parameters you can work with. The ones that we're specifically going to be concerned with for most of this is width and blending. So I'm going to show you what it looks like when you kind of leave the width the default at first. So let's go ahead and pull in, now that we've got our surface to project onto, let's go ahead and pull in a clip here. I'm going to grab this one here called a now. So go ahead and do that. And the way that we make our first connection, like I said before, we're going to take the output port of this movie patch that we've imported, and we're going to connect it to the input patch here. And now you can see that in our viewer, the video is now playing. Now one thing that you might notice is it's not filling up the entire screen, and that has to do with the width attribute that we set. So if you're working in Quartz Composer and you see that happening, you might want to change your width. The reason for that is Quartz Composer has a coordinate system that they've built in, and it basically has it starts here at 0, and it goes at -1 to the left and a +1 to the right, and more or less 1 up and down depending on your aspect ratio. For our purposes, it's enough to know that you just go here and set this width to 2. And you'll see here now that it's filled up the entire viewer window. The blending mode here is going to be replace, and we'll keep it at that for this patch. So we've got some very basic functionality now. We've got the one thing you need to be able to do as a VJ is play videos, and we're doing that. We'd like to mix them, right? We'd like to at least be able to do a crossfade between two videos and have an A/B mix that we can work with. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in another video here. I'm going to select this Shanghai Lights video. And oops, full screen. All right. So now I'm going to grab the output of this patch, and I'm going to go ahead and stick it into Billboard here. You can see that it's changed the patch that it's changed rather the clip that's playing. Ideally, you're going to have a smoother transition between one clip to another than just this, and you're going to want to be able to control it more finely. So there is some functionality built into Quartz Composer that allows us to do that, and that's through using the dissolve patch. Again, to bring up your patches, or the library rather, you can do a Command Enter. So we pull up our patch creator or your library, depending on your version of Quartz Composer. And what we're looking for in this case is a dissolve. So we're going to pull our dissolve in here.
by the way, real quick, if you're on certain versions of Quartz, you might see 2 dissolves. Like mine has 2. One of them says repository composition, and the other has the actual description. You want the one that does not say repository composition.
Right. So if you pull in the one that is accidentally, you pull in the one that's a repository composition, it's going to end up looking more like this. It's going to be this sort of blue destination-looking patch, and that's the one that you don't want. But so you just want to delete that blue, the one that again has a larger description. It'll end up looking something like this. So now that we've got our dissolve patch here, we're going to go ahead and route it to Billboard. Something that's interesting about Quartz Composer, you can have an output port leading to more than one input port. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and put this into the target image port here, this dissolve. And then I'm going to go ahead and patch this all the way through to our main composition. I'm going to go ahead and switch this on a little bit. I do this one, just not too much. So when we patch the dissolve, it should be a pretty smooth transition here. What it's going to do is it's going to delete the existing connection that you see here, and it's just going to replace it. So it's done that. And then we're going to take the target, which is our second image that we're moving to, and we're going to place that there. So the way that we actually affect the change now is we bring up the inspector again, and this is going to get easier. This is just kind of how you do it first. We're going to expose these controls in your dashboard to work with. But for now, what we'll do is we'll highlight the patch that we're using to make the dissolve, and we're going to do a Command I to bring up the inspector again. And you can see here it gives us this little time slider. And this time slider is essentially our fader that we can use to transition from clip to clip. And so you can see as I move this time slider, it's fading from one clip to the other. So we've got the second basic thing that you need to do as a VJ is be able to mix these 2 clips. We've got them sort of flowing back and forth here. If you're following along, one thing that you might notice is happening is that when we start to fade into this other clip, we get something strange happening. And what you'll see here is that it's not that the second clip again is not filling up the entire width of the screen. And this is something you might encounter if you've got different file sizes. Rather different resolutions in your library. So if you take a look at this Shanghai Lights clip, it's 720 by 576. If we go to this now, it's 640 by 480. Ideally, as a DJ, you're going to be processing all the clips that you're going to be feeding your player. You're going to have them all at the frame rate, or all the frame rate, all the resolution, and all in the codecs that you like. But if you're working quickly, or if you don't have the luxury of time, there is a workaround that you can use that you can give it just about anything and still make it work without getting these effects. And that's going to be by doing a resize. So let's go ahead and take a look. Again, we're going to Command Enter to bring up Patch Creator for the library. And we're going to use the image resize. Inspector, and that's a Command I. In the inspector here, you've got a couple of different options. In general, I like to go with stretch. I don't mind if there's a little bit of distortion. I'm going to always have it resized, whether it's bigger or smaller. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that it's at the output resolution that I want. Now, this projector that I'm using right now runs at a rather humble 800 by 600, so I'm going to go ahead and just say everything that's coming out, let's go ahead and make it that size. Depending on what your target resolution is, you might want to change that. But for our purposes here, I'm going to go to 800 by 600. And now I'm going to patch the Shanghai Lights clip into resize. And then I'm going to patch the target, or the end result, that resize clip into our original image. And I want to do this again so that both of our clips are getting resized to that size. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a copy here, and I'm going to use the keyboard shortcuts, and of course go through here as well. I'm going to do a Command C and a Command V, and it's made another copy of this patch. Now if I look at this copy that I've made in the inspector, you'll notice that it has kept the settings, or rather the parameters that were entered in for the original instance. So that's something that's kind of useful when you're improvising. So again, we connect inputs and outputs here. So now these guys are all going in at the same resolution. Oops. So again, these are all coming in at the same resolution. So now, when I do my dissolve, see that there's not that jump in size as the clip comes in and out. So, we've got this at a 50-50 mix here. I'm going to go ahead and do it full screen. I kind of like the way these two clips play together. We've got a few of these elements here that are part of the neon that seem to sort of match up with in size and movement and shape with some of the clips that are going on, or some of the elements that are moving in this other one. That's something you'll want to be looking out for when you're trying to find clips to match together. And so this is a very, very, very basic rig, and we're just doing a simple 50-50 mix, and you can see that you've kind of already got some fairly interesting looking stuff going on here. Take this back down. So you might have noticed that things are getting a little messy here. We've got getting a little crowded. We've got it's kind of starting to look a little complex. So one of the things that we can do to simplify the environment is use macro patches. And a macro patch is a patch that will hold other patches, and you can expose then the controls and parameters for these patches to the outside. Before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the parameters panel that's kind of been hiding out the whole time. And instead of having to go in and pull up the inspector every time that you want to manage a patch, you can, if you have enough screen real estate, use this patch parameters panel. And when you've got this panel up, you'll notice that now when I select the patch, it actually gives me the parameters for it, the time parameter. This sort of as a dashboard, so I can have all the controls of the composition available to me here. Instead of having to click around into each one, eventually we'll be able to have everything appear here. Now notice when I click off of it, it goes away. Ideally, we want to have everything here and be able to click anywhere and be able to activate these controls. So I'm going to show you how to do that at this point. What we can do is we can publish the inputs and outputs of any patch. And that will publish it up to anything that's higher above it. And in this case, the only thing that's above this patch is the parent. So that would be the whole parameter panel here. So I'm going to right-click on the dissolve here, and I'm going to publish its inputs. And the one that I'm interested in publishing at this point is time. One of the things that you can do when you publish an input or an output is you can rename it, and that's going to give it sort of a more friendly name to the parent. In this case, what we've done is we've made a fader, so I'm going to go ahead and just call that fader. And you can see now that even though I don't have any patches selected, I still have access to a crossfader that I made. And it works just the same. So that's the first way that you can get your controls right there at your hands. Now let's do some tidying up here. I'm going to create a macro patch. Somewhere. There's a couple of different ways you can create the macros. Yes, for our purposes here, I'll show you this way. You can select any of the items that you want to encapsulate. In this case, I've just sort of dragged and clicked around these three. I'm going to right-click on them. I'm sorry. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say Create Macro now that I've got them selected. And you can see that it's collapsed them into this macro patch here. Since we published the fader before, it appears now at the top. And so that's available. This is inside of the patch. I double-click on it to sort of dive down into that patch and work with it there. You can see these green dots. what that's telling us is that those ports have been published out to the parent. And as you can see, these are the ports that have been published. I'm going to go in here and just show you kind of another way you can make your patch a bit more user-friendly. The first thing you can do is if you double-click on the title here, you can give it a new name. And what we're doing in this patch, we're mixing and resizing, so I'm going to go ahead and call it that. And then I'll go ahead and go down into this patch. And I'm going to start modifying some of these things there. So I'm going to go to our first image resize, and I'm going to disconnect that. I'm going to disconnect this as well. You can see here I'm sort of unchecking that, and that disconnects the input. And I'm going to disconnect the output as well, so here are the outputs. The reason I'm doing that is so I can give it a more friendly name, so that when I look at the whole composition later, everything has a name that matches more or less up with its function. So I'm going to republish this input, and since it's an A-B mix, I'm going to go ahead and just call this one A. And then I'm going to go down to this input as well, right-click on that, I'm going to publish that as B. For the output here, I'm going to do the same thing, publish outputs. I'm going to call that the A-B mix. So these are all things that I've done inside of the macro. Now when I jump out to the next level, you can see that they've been renamed as they're presented to me now. I've got a mix resize patch, which has a fader, an A and B, and an A-B mix. So when I'm looking at this from the top level view, I'm kind of seeing all the spaghetti flying around. I can have a bit more of an idea of what it does. Also, the very nice thing about it is that it's made my patch much more compact. Instead of having to deal with 3 patches and all the different connections and all the different interfaces, I can just look at one, which is much more tidy. So now we'll move this back to 4. And we'll go ahead and reconnect everything. I'll connect my image to A, my other image to B. Image on my billboard, and my fader, I'm going to go ahead and republish that. I'm going to keep its name, fader. So now that appears again on the patch parameters panel on my dashboard here, so that I can make any modifications that I need to, or change the parameters. In this case, actually operate the composition. So that's basically step 1. Those are some of the very basic things that you can do. Let's go ahead and save this composition. We're gonna be moving forward in just a second here, but go ahead and save this guy. Save it to desktop here. Let's call it JPEG. So that's the A/B mix portion. Are there any questions yet? No? Okay. So we've got a very sort of basic method of operating a VJ rig. You could probably do a whole event with just A/B mixes, and it would be just fine. Your library will often, like I said, if you have the right kind of clips, if they're complementary, if if all you need to do is fades, this will work just fine. And in many instances, it'll be sufficient. But let's go ahead and do just some slightly more sophisticated compositing effects. And take a look at how to import patches from other compositions.
At this point, are you able to drag in from the Finder different movies? Or?
Yes, absolutely. So say that you wanted to just use this as your basic setup. We've got a whole bunch of different. We've got a few different clips here. Let's go ahead and just grab this one. So the basic way that you would operate this rig. Now, this being Quartz Composer, you can make this much more modular. You can have a much fancier way to do this, but I haven't really felt the need to in the events that I've done. I usually just like to do this. You can grab your next clip, and pull that in there. Back. So I'm going to go ahead and fade back over to this clip. And what I would do is essentially to queue up my next clip. Instead of having this now clip, I'm going to go ahead and switch that to static bars by moving that to my B input there. So now I've got, this clip is essentially gone. I can highlight this and just press delete to get So that gets pretty fluid once you do it a few times, that's how you would operate the basic two-channel mixer here.
Well, just so I understand, right? You're actually doing this live, like as a music exchange or whatever. You're doing this like that.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so I'd have I'd have a whole library in general. I have a pretty large library of clips here. And so I would grab any one of these and move them into my composition and work with them that way. But yeah, that's the basic mode of operation for this rig. Like I said, once you've done it a couple of times, it gets pretty fluid. You can see let's do mix in. Let's do that, and then I can fade over and click. I'm going to be showing you how to set up a MIDI controller as well, which can really speed up the fluency that you can work with as well. There's kind of one less thing that you have to look around for. So, question?
Well, you just answered. I was wondering if you could connect MIDI to these.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to that. I kind of wanted to show how we can operate with just the mouse at first. So that's available to everybody if you don't want to invest in a MIDI controller yet. Kind of want to just get started. But yeah, I use a MIDI controller all the time. And it's definitely if you're going to be doing this, more often, it's definitely something you might want to invest in and play around with. Okay, so that's the basic rig. What we're going to do next is we're going to look at how to do a Luma key. For those of you that may be familiar with Luma key, you're going to take the brightness value of a clip, and you're going to say, okay, anything below a certain brightness value I want to make transparent. So the Luma key patch that we're going to be using was developed by Acton. I'll give you links to all these resources. He's done some pretty impressive stuff with Quartz Composer. So this is a custom patch that he's developed, and I'll sort of show you how to get that, how custom patches work as well. So let's go into our Quartz DJ folder here, and let's pull up Luma Chroma. If you take a look at Memo's site, he's made this available for download. It's got its own composition. It has a whole bunch of other sort of things attached to it. I've taken, from this composition, I've taken just the piece that you really need to make it work in your own rig, and I've taken that out and sort of bundled it up here in this Luma Chroma. So this is going to open up a new composition. You can see we've got CSI Luma key and Chroma key. The Luma key is the one that we're working with now. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to do a copy, Command C, or you can menu. Close preview for that guy. And I'm going to do a paste here. So we've got our Luma key. We also need a billboard to display the Luma key on once we've actually got it affected here. So let's go ahead and just copy our existing billboard. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and rename the billboards as well. Call this guy AV Mix. And let's go ahead and call this one Luma. One thing that you're going to want to change, and you can do this again if you've got the parameter panel open, it'll be right here. Otherwise, you can do Command I to take a look at the parameters. One thing that we're going to change about this panel is the blending mode. So instead of replace here, we want to change this to over. And that will make use of any transparency that's being passed to it by a patch. And so in this case, the Luma key, the way it's been developed, it does transfer its transparency data over, and it's able to be used by your billboard here. Let's just take a quick peek here also at the Luma keys, or what makes it tick. If you are a more advanced programmer than I am, and are familiar with Core Image or OpenGL, or specifically GLSL, or even JavaScript, you can use that to create any kind of effects that you're able to program, and you can build those into patches, you can publish inputs and outputs, and you can use those to create effects in Quartz Composer here. So you can do some pretty powerful things with that. So let's go ahead and connect. Let's do pre-connect our image here. And let's go ahead and use this now clip again. So we've got this guy. We've got it in our AV mix still, hopefully. And this is sort of what it looks like when you do that 50-50, more or less. You can see that these areas, even inside the mix, are sort of transparent, and you can see the other composition through them. We want to sharpen that up a bit, so we're going to do that with the Luma key. So we'll take the image here, and we'll patch that into our Luma key. Alright, so one thing you notice that it's kind of replaced it entirely at this point. And that has to do with the fact that it's on a higher layer. You can see the numbers here. We've got layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. And again, we've got our blending modes. In this case, it's blending over, and we don't have any transparency data being passed to it because we haven't set that in our Luma key yet. But you can see here we've got, this isn't quite straight black, but it's dark enough that we can use, it's got a very low luminance, so we can use that to pass some luminance data down. So if we take a look at some of the parameters we have here, you've got a threshold and a softness. The threshold is kind of more of a coarse adjustment, and the softness is more fine-tuning. If you've got some very nuanced luminance data that you want to extract, I would say to use the softness. If you've got, you really want to kind of take a hammer to it, use threshold. Actually, in most circumstances, I found that softness is sufficient to do what we need to do. I'm going to go ahead and just bump that up just a little bit. And so what you can see now is that in our composition, we've got a much more solid matte going on here. So you can see that these sort of larger colored areas, there's no transparency to them at all. So we've got a full overlay going here to the foreground and the background. And you can do some fairly interesting effects just with the Luma key. A lot of times you'll find clips that seem to almost be designed specifically for use with the Luma key. So one of those cases might be, let me go ahead and get two clips that I think are complementary for showing off sort of another sort of thing that you can do with the Luma key. We've got this orange Kaleido clip in our Quartz VJ folder. I'm going to drag that in here, and I'm going to use that to replace the Shanghai lights. So let's select this and delete. And connect that to our A source here. This resize patch. And you can see that that's showing that in the background. And a more complementary clip to that would be this circle flip. And you notice they both have a sort of radial composition, or they're both circular. So we'll drag that clip in here, and let's go ahead and make that our image here, matting. And let's go back to our layer here, ourselves a solid mix. And so you've got a composition here. You can see that they kind of use the same symmetry. They seem to kind of go together, and that's all done via luminance. Normally this would just be a straight black. This is using the Luma key, so knocking that out, and you can see behind it. Okay, and we've also shown one of the other issues. And guess what we need to do here? Yeah, so we need to use a resize. So let's go ahead and just copy the one that we have. Go back in here, grab this guy, copy it, come back up to the top. Paste our resize. It's still got all the ones we need. It's still got 600. So now you can see this tracks a little bit more closely with what we want over at the edge of the screen here. And coincidentally, the symmetry is kind of more in line here.
Question on the resize.
Yeah.
Is there a way to, I see that it has different modes, so you have stretch, fit, or fill, but none of them seem to proportionately fill the screen. In other words, if you put it on stretch,
the stretch
well,
will, yeah,
it seems
the
actually
stretch is going to definitely it's going to hew to the aspect ratio.
Oh, okay.
And this is the one that I almost always use. I don't mind a little distortion, you know, when I'm doing compositions.
Mhm.
So I'll almost always do the stretch.
Okay. Got it. For some reason, when I first attached it, it seemed like it was not doing it. It looks right.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how the others will work. I suspect they're going to try to preserve the original aspect ratio of the video and just make the pixels fit. But the stretch works well for me, so I don't really venture into the others at this point. So let's see. We've got our luminance working here. Again, one of the things that you can do here is publish these guys. So if we want to take a look at our patch parameter panel here, our basic dashboard, we can publish these to the dashboard. So I'll go ahead and take this threshold. I'm going to rename it Luma threshold. I'll do the same thing for the softies. So now on our dashboard, we can affect these parameters directly. One thing you notice, if you go into the negative here, on your softness here, it's going to blank out the mat entirely. And you can always just enter in a simple 0 value if you want to get back to the start. Just tweak that up just a little bit to get back to it. And again, if you want to do some tidying up, create some macros here to make things flow a little bit more smoothly. I'm going to go ahead and create a macro with just these two guys. So we've got our macro patch from the Luma, which again, kind of you can see how things have shrunk down from where they were before. It makes things a bit more manageable. And we can go in here, we've already got the publishing that we did, so the names have already changed. All right, so we've got our AV mix, we've got our Luma. Oh, another thing that we might want to publish is the ability to switch this Luma off and on. So if we don't want this to be on the screen at all times, there's a couple of things we can do. We can take away its image source, and that will just, again, drop us back to our AV mix. But probably more convenient than that is actually using the enable control. Go ahead and move things around a bit here so you can see it's on the screen. So we've got the enable control here on the actual Luma billboard, and I'm going to publish its input. I'm going to call it Luma on. So we can go back to our main panel here. So we've got the ability to control our Luma right from the dashboard again. So we've got all the controls that we need to operate the composition right here again. So we can switch the Luma on and off right from the top. And separate from the Luma, we can control our AV mix for the background. So you can see that we can switch between the two clips. Independently control our Luma. And if we wanted to adjust the finer parameters, we can do that as well from the dashboard. So we've got our AV mix, we've got our Luma. Are there any questions so far? Okay. So moving on, another thing that you can do is Chroma key, which is similar to a Luma key, but you can get a bit more specific. Instead of saying just anything with a specific brightness value, we can start to take a look at individual colors in the composition and begin to key out on them. the effects that I've gotten out of the Chroma patch that we're going to be using are perhaps not quite as sharp or smooth looking. Part of that's dependent on the source video that I'm using, and part of it's dependent on the patch itself. You might need to finesse a little bit, but I'll go ahead and show you what we're talking about here. Let's go ahead and pull up our Luma and Chroma again. And this time we're going to be using the Chroma key. The Chroma key was developed by, his name is Ian McDonald. He operates under the name of Daisy Rust. And he had a digital puppet project that he used to sort of insert his mouth and eyes into composition. You might have seen this on, I think he did some of the Conan O'Brien show, and some older Hanna-Barbera animations, I think, utilized this as well. But so he's recreated this effect using the Chroma key, and you can see what he's wanting to do here is select out on this Chroma blue color and then insert that into his composition. So we're going to be doing something similar. We'll take this, Command-C to copy it out of this composition. Let's do a Command-V to bring it to ours. So now we've got our Chroma key. Let's go back to our billboard here. Let's just make a copy of this one. Operate a little differently, but it should work for our purposes. Disconnect this bit that we published here. Let's change it to Chroma. We've got our width there, we've got the blending. Now the blending is over, which is similar to what the Luma does. I don't think it's going to make a difference in this patch. This Chroma key doesn't pass its transparency information the same way, but there is a workaround for that, and I'll show you that in a moment here. So the image that we're going to be using as the target of our Chroma, let's grab this tri-fly. It's got a few different colors that we can play around with. So I'm going to grab that tri-fly and put it here into our foreground image. And I'm going to grab this composite image and place it right here. And you can see that it's kind of starting to affect this Chroma. It's basically picking just about all colors at this point. So anything that's any color at all other than black is going to get masked out, and we can start to adjust the parameters of that Chroma patch. We're also going to need a resize here, as you may have noticed. So let's go ahead and grab that guy too. Here to one of our patches that already has a resize. Command-C copy. Paste it up here. Resize image. We still need to do some fine tuning here on what the Chroma is doing, but got the basic image set up here. One thing that we will also need to do is we'll need to feed our mix back into this patch specifically. Since it's not using the standard sort of overlays that we've set up in the past, we're going to have to redirect our mix here into the background channel. So we'll go up to your MIDI mixer, drag this back down to the background image. You can see here now that the matting is in effect. The Chroma is sort of doing what it's designed to do. Like I said before, it's picking up just about every color, and it's using that to matte. But we can fix that in just a moment here. So to change the behavior of that, we're going to go into the Chroma key. And we've got two options that we can work with here. I'll go ahead and publish them just so we can see them on the main panel. We've got the key color, we've got sensitivity. So I'm going to publish the key color. And I'm going to call it Chroma color. And we've got the sensitivity. I'm going to call it Chroma sensitivity. So you can see now that they're available to us on our main panel, our dashboard. And so let's go ahead and try and zero in on the color here. There's a lot of different colors available to us. You can use the standard color picker here, kind of like the hue, saturation, and lightness. And sliders. And let's try and pick maybe, let's pick our saturation. Let's see if we can zero in on there's a particular feature that's sort of this pink purple color. Let's go and grab that one. And once we get just adjustment to our sensitivity, that should start to zero us in on the color that we're interested in. So you can see we're kind of getting close now. You can see that these other colors are staying opaque. And just this nice bright purple is what's going to be transparent. You might need to fine tune the sensitivity to really get that to do what you want. Get it to a decent value. And so we can go through the spectrum here, and we can start to fine tune down on the different colors that we want to block out. So right now we're matting out on this pink. Let's say that we want to take this these yellow bars that are coming out here. We want to mat those out. We'll just take a slide over here to yellow, and we'll start to approach the values that we're looking for. You can see now that the yellow bands are the ones that are now being matted out. Should work similarly all the way down here for red. Now we've got our red bands matting out. And like as I mentioned before, you can play around with the sensitivity, or maybe more ideally find clips that don't have quite as much artifacting. You can see that there are a few sort of really jaggy lines and artifacts that are happening, and a lot of this is due to the quality of this clip, and that it's not really specifically designed for chroma keying. Those are the two basic ways that we can begin to mix outside of strict A/B. So we can mix on colors, we can mix on brightness, and for the rate values, that's about 95% of it. Are there any questions about the chroma?
Is there an alpha matte patch?
There are lots of different ways to generate mats, and there are different ways that you can play around with them. I haven't used them personally, but the answer is yes. There are a lot of different ways that you can feed mats to different parts of your composition. You can see here you've got an image and you've got a mask image. So you can, if you have something that's specifically designed with an alpha channel, you can feed that to your mask image here, and then that can also be used to composite your clips. So yeah, you can do a lot with alpha. The patches that I use kind of incorporate that in and of themselves, but there is a lot more support for it in Quartz Composer.
Do you know if will it understand like an embedded alpha channel from like an image sequence? So you have an image sequence of pings, 24-bit pings.
Yeah. It will find the well, actually, I don't know. In the past, what I've done is I've actually had to create my own mats. So if I have image files, I've created mats and specifically fed those in.
Okay.
As masks as well. So the short answer is maybe. I don't know.
It could be something where you could just extract that one channel and then put that into a Luma.
There's a lot that you can do in this environment. I'd be really surprised if there's either not a custom patch that somebody's developed, or if it's built into the environment and there's a way to do it. I haven't used it personally though. So we've got Luma, we've got Chroma, we've got our basic mixers. Again, we can publish the enable input to our dashboard. So if we want to just switch off the Chroma channel, we can do that as well. Oh, we've got to get that sensitive name here. Change this to Chroma enable. Or Chroma on. So we've got our Luma on, we've got our Chroma on, we've got the different controls. Essentially, at this point, we could do just about everything we need to with this rig and control it. Aside from importing our clips, which are something we can do from the Finder here, we can control it all through this panel. So,
I have a question, Susan.
yeah.
Maybe I set up something wrong, but if I turn off the chroma, then I'll see the Luma, that white ringed animation. If if I have Chroma on, regardless of where I'm keying, I never see that.
Yeah, so the issue there is that what we did is we actually went down to this bottom level here, and we pulled our AV mix, and we sort of leapfrogged the Luma layer entirely,
Right.
and we put it in as our background. So one thing that we could do, if you wanted to make this something that you could definitely stack that way, you could do a couple of things. You could play around with these layers. You can encapsulate everything below the Chroma into a macro, and then feed that in as the background. There are a bunch of different options. Again, it's a very flexible environment. I haven't really done that. I generally don't stack Luma and Chroma, but if you wanted to do that, that's how you do it. It's just sort of an idiosyncrasy of patches that I've used, that I've found to. So that's the basic rig in general. So if this is what Nathan was talking about. So he's got the Luma channel here that's active, and he'll add the Chroma. And if you notice, it's actually matting back out to the very beginning. You don't see our Luma spinning in the background here. And again, that's because what we did here is when we connected this mix to the background, so we leapfrogged this whole layer.
Is there a way to input live video?
Yes, there is. So
I think it's video input.
that's right. Yeah. So the source device, video input, and I think the default that it's going to do is my camera here. Go to settings, and I think if you have multiple cameras, you can select which one you want. Go ahead and just tell it built in on site. Let's go ahead and save the Chrome here, save the Luma. It's back into our AV mix. And you can see you've got the live feed in there. Maybe get a little bit of feedback if you wanted to.
Nice.
So yeah, that's how you implement the live controls. You can, I'm not sure exactly how to incorporate them, but if you use Siphon, you can feed data from other applications into and out of Quartz Composer. So that's the basic rig. One of the things that people are doing these days, and that I utilize a little bit on my Friday shows, is projection mapping. I can show you a little bit of how that works. I've actually incorporated some of those patches as well. Now, it really kind of only makes sense to see if you have a projector set up. You'll kind of see what I mean in a moment here, but I'll go ahead and show you the basics. I'm going to go ahead and just save this for now, and then I'm going to just make this a lot simpler to work with, so there's a little less distraction here. So we'll take our basic AV mix again. Let's just say we want to have two of those. So faders. You've got some patches in here that will affect that as well. They're called projection map. There's a composition here called PMAP. This again was developed by Memo Acton. He's the one that designs these patches. So in this case, he's got a destination patch that he's used some of the custom code to modify here. So we're going to copy both of these and paste them into our composition here. And so what this enables you to do is, let me go ahead and get rid of this destination entirely. We're going to be passing the result of our mix now into this projection mapping quad. So I'm going to take the AV mix here. You can see that looks more or less the same. So one of these things you can do, this is a very more basic projection mapping rig in that it really only kind of works with quads. You can maybe do a triangle with it, and it's going to do a bit of distortion. But let me kind of show you just the sorts of things that you can do with it. First off, the way that it works, It's got a test image that you can use to sort of calibrate your maps. You can see that if I click on the test image here, it gives us a nice grid that we can use to sort of play around with. So that's the basic way that the patch works. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the grid. We've got a bunch of different ways we can deform this grid by controlling the corner points of it. So you can see I've got the X value for the bottom left, the Y value for the bottom left, and that just sort of continues to turn around the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this back up to normal, and I'll show you just sort of how, now that you've seen sort of how you can bring this image up, and you can modify some of the parameters of it. I'll just show you sort of how it works when you start to create projection here. Oh, one of the other things you can do, so you can have a couple of these and they'll overlap. So just to show you, I'm going to go ahead and break this out break this image out from our links. Pull it down to here. And then I'll copy this portion again, quad controller, and copy the quad. Paste it down here. Get after our AU mix, AU input image. So I have two of these now. And they, like I said before, they'll both overlap. So you can see, you can have any number of these, basically limited by how much your hardware can crunch. You can overlap them all through the same projector beam, and that's kind of how you'll affect the mass. So now that you've seen that you can have two of these, you can overlay them. This is kind of what happens to the image after you distort it.
Sergio, I have a question. So I think I lost the part where you found the quad controller, because I'm trying to find it in the library.
Okay, yeah. So that didn't come out of the library. That was actually one of the ones that it's in the
Oh,
files.
it's in the folder.
Yeah. So there's a composition here called PMAP, and if you open that,
Oh, got it.
if you open that PMAP composition, you can see those two there. So that's where those came from.
Okay, thank you.
So now you see we've got these two that we can overlay, and we can affect the different parameters of them. I'm going to go ahead and get these guys back to more or less the same. Well, let's just go ahead and leave them like this, and I'll show you what it looks like when you're actually doing the projection mapping. Make that full screen. So you've seen the handles that I sort of have to modify these. Let's just take our screen and do something like that. So say I've got a couple of different surfaces that I want to project on, and I want to be able to cover them both in a way that sort of maps to where the projector is and where they are. Let's see if I can get out wide enough here. I think that'll sort of do the job for now. So I'm going to be shooting for like most of this guy and this guy as well. And then you can see that they're on different planes here. The projector is going to have to kind of deform to make it work. But this can be useful if you have any kind of cuboid object that you're trying to project onto, or if you've got just two different planes in the same projection thread you're trying to project onto. If you've seen any of the videos that I posted to Google+, that's actually what I use to create the split effect, and I'll show you that maybe after we've done this demo. So I'm going to just switch up my preferences really quick so that I can see this and then also operate it. So I'm going to just change my screen here. Stop mirroring. And so this is sort of what I was talking about before, where if you look at my machine here, I've got well, let me drag this over to the secondary display. I'm going to full screen it. So we've got that here, and in a production, or in a production environment, what it'll look like is I will have my clip library and the Quartz Composer interface here on the laptop that I can use to actually make changes and work with the composition. And on the secondary display, that will be the actual output that comes in through the different billboards that we set up. inside of the composition. So we've got our different planes here that we're projecting onto. I'm going to go ahead and try and get these set up so that it somewhat fills them. Again, we're still a little sort of off axis. I'm not filling all the way on the left, but let's grab this one and try and move it over to the right. So ideally, your shapes are going to be a bit more well aligned. We've got some, what we're projecting on is a little bit different here than what you might set up to actually do projection mapping. You can kind of see how we're playing with the geometry. Let me see if I can get us a bit closer. All right, so I'll take the top left. This guy. This is also useful if you're set up in a place where you might not have the best projector mounting situation. You can actually kind of use this just to correct keystoning issues that you might have if it's a little difficult to do with the projector. I kind of do that when I set up, and it usually works pretty well. I don't get too much distortion. Here, that might be, that's sort of the limits of the projector right now. Filling what we can with this plane. Let's get the skew corrected here. So we'll go back to the other file that we have set up. Put that over as far as that wants to go. Fine-tune these values, but this is the basic idea of how you're going to get these two quads set up. And you can see now that through just a straight throw of my projector, I'm able to cover a somewhat curved surface. There's a bit more fine-tuning I can do to really get it down. But now that I've got these done, essentially we can pull these off, and we'll get back to the original clips that we had. And so we've mapped our original projection onto a somewhat irregular surface. And like I was saying before, now you can connect the outputs of your entire rig to one or more of these. That's basically how that works. Any questions on the projection mapping?
So easy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So it's a great tool. That was the memo acting that put that together, and I've seen that used by several other people in different venues. But yeah, so if you've got a simple surface, the projection mapping is quick and easy to do through Quartz. I think the original design for this was actually to put into VMX through the Quartz Composer interface. But again, you can do it native in Quartz.
I have a question about performance.
Yeah.
In your experience, say you're running off your laptop, how many video inputs have you been able to kind of maintain and mix in real time?
Yeah, so I've got two that I use. It really depends. I haven't really kind of felt like inspired to branch out into more. This is a bit of an older laptop, so that's going to be a limiting factor. The kinds of clips that you use, if you use a codec that's computationally intensive, that's going to cost you.
Like H.264.
Yeah. So there's you can use something like Photo JPEG, or there are other codecs that essentially do a lot less compression. So your file sizes are a lot bigger, but you don't have to crunch as hard when you're actually pulling up the video and decompressing the frames. I'm a little bit curious that you can import animated GIFs into Quartz Composer. So I'm kind of a little curious to see how those would work in a larger scale. I suspect that they perform pretty well, at least. But yeah, 2 is the only ones that I've done. Another big reason for that is that I've got on one of my mapped panels, I have an audio reactive component, and that can get a little hungry sometimes just to sit there and compute that. So let me show you sort of how I use that in the live shows that I do. Let's get this going. Oh gosh. All right, let's fix this real quick. Kind of more or less. That's kind of more or less how it works. You can see that there's one pane here that's on the front, in front of the performers, in front of the DJs, and there's another pane behind them that's showing a different image, and that's all being shot from one projector that's kind of up there. And so this would be one of the quads up in front with this audio reactive bit here, and then there'd be another one in the back. It's kind of sparse right now, but that's how you might see it in a production environment. Let's see, I think that's just about all I have prepared. Inside of the folder, I have, if you download it here, I've got links, and there are a lot of different resources in here. One of the great places to find loops is this Beeple, EJ Loops. This guy has produced a lot of high-def content. He uses Cinema 4D. So for instance, this clip here that you're seeing in the background, that's created by him. He's got a lot more that are really nice and abstract and colorful. And he publishes them under a Creative Commons license, so you can remix them and do whatever you like with them. There is archive.org, which is a great resource for lots of things. They also have a huge moving image library. They've got films going back to I think Edison, so they go all the way back to pretty much the modern day, and most of it is either Creative Commons licensed or in the public domain already. The others of these are kind of more Quartz Composer type resources, but those are sort of links to the community, and I think one of those is to Apple's documentation. Any other questions?
Couple.
Yep.
Is there a way where, if you want to drop a clip in on the fly, you have to drop it in on the fly and then wire it up, or can you just drop it in somewhere where?
So currently you have to drop it in.
And then number 2, how can you make the MIDI fire?
Oh, right, MIDI.
Continuous
You can
control.
give me just a second, and I'll show you something about both of those. Let me switch back here. don't think so. I just need to get it back to where it was before. Got a little out of whack my mapping. Alright, so I'm using a little bit of the body, but I think that'll be sufficient for the rest of what we're doing here. Okay, so again, it's a very customizable environment. One of the things that you can do if you want to start to get into it, this movie importer, what we've done when we drag our clips in is we're actually creating an instance of a movie importer patch. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up movie importer patch. And the basic components of a movie importer patch are location, right? So you can go here, if you know the path in your file system, you can go and type in the basic path that you're prone to. It's going to take a little doing, but another thing that you have is a directory scanner. So you can use the directory scanner, you can feed it a directory. For instance, this was starting here. And what it's going to do is it's going to return a structure that will have essentially an array that will give you the list of the files that you're working with. And then you can design a way to scan through that to the name that you want. There's a bunch of different ways. I mean, you basically just you would select the index where you wanted it, and you could do it that way. So it's a little bit. It would be a bit more maybe simple and fluid. You need to know the names of your clips and where they're indexed. I've kind of thought about doing it, but in my experience, it's been enough to just drag the clips in and wire them up. I suppose if I had a situation where I really needed to be able to select among a group of files really quickly and switch back and forth, this would be the way that I would do it. I would create the index and jump around in it. If there are only a few clips, if there are only a handful, and you wanted to jump between them, you could also use a multiplexer. And so you can say, say there are 5 clips that I want to load up, and I want to be able to switch between them right away. You can create your different sources, and then you can do all different sorts of things with a multiplexer. You can have data that you're multiplexing, demultiplexing. You can also do it with well, you can see structures here, meshes, so it'll take 3D info. But in our case, we do image. And so we can have a couple of different images going in, and then we would, based on how we have the source index, right now we've just got three numbers. So we've got 0, 1, and 2. Well, 0 and 1, we've just got 2, so we've got 0 and 1. But you can extend this. You can say I want 10 members. So if you had just a few clips that you wanted to bounce around, you could do that way, and that might be a little bit easier than working with the directory scanner.
I have a MIDI slider.
Yeah.
MIDI, like an old PC-10.
Yeah.
And I could probably like hit one, fade it up, and target one of those arrays. Could I not?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so you could also you could map specific keys or buttons to clips that you have in your multiplexer. Which might be a good way to do that if you've got several that you want to drag in, and you want to jump between them really quickly. That'd probably be a good way to do that. Let me go. That's a good segue into the MIDI here. So let's back this up a bit. So again, we've got our basic that we have set up, and we've got our 80 mix that we published. This guy, not doing that anymore. We'll just drop in Pearl Billboard. All right, so we're back to this part. Resolution seems a lot lower. All right. That's better. That's really great here. Okay, so we've got our rig here. And yeah, I've got this MIDI controller. It's a bit of an older one, but it works really well. I like to work with it. It's got this nice crossfader here. It's got a bunch of dials. Any controller that's got these sort of controls will work for this. Keyboards that have these will work. There are a couple of different ways to grab MIDI input, or a couple of different types of MIDI input we can grab. Go ahead and let this guy up. So it's useful to be able to go to our patch parameters here and work with the fader that way. But it'd be nice if I didn't even have to look at this at all. And if I had all my controls exposed to MIDI, then I'd have more room to take a look just at this, or I could shrink this even further and just use it just to pull my clips in and work with the real estate that way. So to connect MIDI, what we do, go ahead and pull up our library again. And we've got a couple of different types of MIDI senders and receivers. In our case, it's a MIDI controller, so the MIDI notes will pick up things from a keyboard. What we want are the control signals, though. It will also do OSC, if anybody uses OSC as opposed to MIDI. So we'll go with our MIDI controller's receiver. So it comes with this pitch wheel and modulation wheel. I've never used them, but it kind of wants to throw that into every single instance. And essentially what you do is you train it to listen to your controller, and it learns that way. So I'm going to go here to the parameters, the settings, and I'm going to tell it learn controllers to observe. So you can see you can select specific channels for a receiver if you've got a more complex MIDI setup. I usually just leave all of the defaults from here to learn. So I click on learn here, and I move my slider a little bit, and then you can see it's added a pan. So I can take that pan and I can connect it up to my fader. And now I've got a crossfade.
Sweet.
And that'll work for a lot of the other things that we work with. Let me see if I can go back to previous conversation where we had a few other things going on. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing. We'll pull up our MIDI controller receiver, and we're going to teach it. Controller, so just like learn, move that, there's my pan in, connect that to my fader. That's just as it was before. But then we can do a few other things. So say I want to start working with the Luma. Drag this down here. I've got a bunch of different wheels here. Go ahead and go in here again. And I'm going to train. Controller. I'll turn this one in. So it gives us another controller here. And take that and connect it to the Luma threshold. Let's go to the settings again here.
Are all the MIDI outputs going to be 0 to 1, like normalized, or does it depend?
I don't know. I just know that it kind of pulls out these random controller names every time. I don't know. I haven't worked with many other controllers.
Yeah, no, I more mean the actual, like, the number that's being output.
Oh, yeah. So you can see, if you hover over the port, you can kind of see what it's putting out. So right here we're going for 0 to 1.
Okay. So in general, it seems like it'll be normalized, like the output will be 0 to 1.
Yeah, and in some instances I've noticed it seems pretty smart about knowing what you plug it into, and it'll adjust to those values, like you're saying. But in other instances, you might have to do some math to it if you don't want it to work as much. So there's a lot of different sort of ways you can manipulate the numbers that are coming out. You can just do a straight math. You can do addition. You can do expressions if you want to do any sort of percentage or algebraic or modulo operations to it. You can do that.
Makes it pretty simple because those continuous controllers are 0 to 1 to 127.
Yeah, 0 to 127. Yeah, 127.
Yeah, and actually, as I look at this controller here,
It's nice to have it normalized.
Yeah, right off the bat.
the display on this controller is showing me 0 to 128, and the value that's actually appearing here is that 0 to 1, that normalized value. So you can see that I've attached that. Let's go ahead and do the softness as well. Well, let's go ahead and attach that to the softness so you can sort of see what that's going to do.
Your enable is published. You have to turn it on at the yeah.
Well, no, it still doesn't like it. Oh, here we go. Luma. Thank you. All right, so we've got our Luma, and now that we've got that, I can adjust that softness value here, and it's not doing a whole lot other than really switching off and on because of the nature of this clip. It's a straight black and white. Let's go ahead and just see what we're going to get a bit more fine-tuned Luma. So we'll change this in our mix back to orange. Put this in here. So now you can see that we've got a bit more fine control over what's happening with this Luma. So, and that's all through just through this knob control here. So back to the original. So that's the basics of how you hook up MIDI. You can send MIDI in, you can send MIDI out. Again, you can do OSC.
About what patches to look for audio input if you want to start doing some audio reactive stuff.
Yeah.
Just want to become right there.
So I think it's actually called audio input. Yeah, so you've got audio input and you've got audio processors. You might notice a few. Let me go ahead and pull up my performance rating. You can see some of the stuff that I've done. There are some idiosyncrasies to it, right? Some idiosyncrasies to it that I've sort of had to just kind of work around. See, these are the two planes that I'm mapping on here. Normally this is on the podium that's in front of the DJs, and this would be the background. And you can see that this is audio reactive. So we've got this sort of test bars here that I made, and they'll react to audio in the room. This static is also being generated from Quartz Composer. Let's see if we can get into that real quick. So essentially I'm just generating random noise, and then I'm taking that and I'm transforming that image. I'm giving it sort of crazy data from an LFO. You can see I've got a random LFO here, and it's just sort of played around with it to get a more or less chaotic effect. Without the LFO transformation, you can see that it's just this noise pattern, right? But then as I start to put the outputs of this LFO in here, it starts to do some sort of crazy stuff. Actually, I guess I could probably just go with rotation, and that would be fine. And you can see that it's giving it all kinds of different values that are moving that noise around to kind of make it look like static. And this is the audio input. We're just feeding into this audio spectrum. And I believe this is right out of Quartz Composer. This is one of the audio visualization compilations or compositions that they give you. It gets a little complicated when you start to really get into it. There are a couple of them. A couple of the bars that it gives you are for some reason just always really high or always pegged low. So I've kind of had to sort of work around those. I think there are some places where I've done some math to them. So in these instances, I've had to sort of adjust the values higher or lower depending on the different audio. There's a lot of fiddling that you get into once you really start to build these out. And I think that a good starting point for that would be to actually start with these visualizer compositions. So it sort of fills a lot of the story. So you can see kind of what you start with here with what they give you. And you can see all that other, I had to add all this other stuff in there to get to do what I wanted to do. But this is a good starting point. It'll give you something that you can work with and sort of get your hand around to begin to do audio input. Any other questions?
I think you really gotta take some time and experiment on that so that you get used to it.
Absolutely.
It really feels like it's not that complicated. You just have to understand the basics and mess with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we kind of, what we rushed through was a process of me sitting with Quartz Composer and kind of playing around with connecting different things. And I mean, I don't know, I would guess there's maybe 10 or 12 hours of work, that I did just kind of like sort of clunking through the interface until I certainly sort of get the basic node-based model that they have sort of laid out for you. And then once you kind of have that aha moment, you can really start to do things that are more fluid, and you can experiment with a lot of the different things. We've really just sort of scratched the surface of Chrome, or of Quartz Composer rather, with what the kinds of things that you can do. Like I said, so we've got our basic VJ rig here, but it really is a programming environment in its own right. It's very abstract and very sort of high level, but you can drill down if you want to, as you can see what people have done with these chromas. If you're very crafty from a tech standpoint, you can use OpenGL or Image or JavaScript to sort of do your own operations on these pixels and do all kinds of things.
At night, do you projection map on the buildings across the street?
I don't. My projector is not strong enough for that, and the kind of rig that I have right now is very, very basic. The geometry that I can handle right now are, there's just a couple of planes. It's very.
It would be kind of fun though.
It would. That's actually something I'd like to get into doing. I know there's a suite out there called MadMapper. I can't remember who designed it, but that's something that you can use, and I think you can feed it more complex geometry and have it work with. I think it's becoming more of a thing now. So there's a bigger scene growing up around it. Yeah, it's definitely something that I think would be fun to do. I think that unless you do it at night and you have lighting just the way you want, you really need trying to look at a very expensive projector.
Absolutely. You do at night when there's no moon.
Yeah. I mean, you could. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if even with a little 25. I mean, you can get like a 4,500 lumen projector. I think for about $700 and some odd bucks now used, and that'd probably be powerful enough on a dim night to get some interesting stuff up on a building.
Yeah, we might do a whole Processing Orlando event about projection mapping and maybe play with that a little bit more, because there's a lot of cool stuff going on with that.
When you make the building collapse.
Right.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sergio. That was
Yeah, you're welcome.
fantastic.
So.
Great.